Trying harder is not the answer. Sorry to tell you. And that's a big one. That's a big, big, big one to swallow. A big one to swallow. The world is inundated with rah, rah, rah motivational books. And you gotta try harder. You gotta sleep when you're done and not when you're tired. And they're nice to listen to. And there is place for motivation. But if you have a mental block, trying harder is simply not going to bring it into your life, because breakthrough is the result of a healing process. And so now to answer your question, now that I've given that like a little soapbox introduction, when you identify that you have a limiting belief or a negative belief, a negative belief is not something that I can talk about now in a way that a person can understand what to do, because it's essentially shadow work and the integration of shadow work. And that is a process in itself, a very grueling process, but arguably the most important work that a person can do, because what is more important than me discovering my own self?
Welcome to the Well Worshipped Man podcast, where men come to build unshakable presence, become the rock in their relationships, and build a legacy that lasts beyond their years. Here, we explore the path to mature masculinity through humble power, daily devotion, and unwavering integrity.
Thanks, baby. Today on the podcast, we have a special guest. Doron-Yitzchak Gibor is the founder of Breakthrough Matrix Coaching, an airtight philosophy on the technicalities of human transformation grounded in Jungian psychology, Kabbalistic principles, and universal laws. His framework integrates shadow work, subconscious reprogramming, and deep inner alignment into a clear and practical methodology for personal evolution. With over 16 years of intensive experiential work and thousands of hours mentoring individuals, leaders, and groups, Doron-Yitzchak has developed a rare ability to decode emotional patterns and guide people through profound internal breakthroughs. Known for his clarity, directness, and grounded presence, Doron-Yitzchak helps people dissolve lifelong blocks, reclaim their power, and align their lives with their highest truth. He is the creator of Shadow Breakthrough and Breakthrough Momentum, two flagship programs designed to help individuals break patterns and embody a more mature, sovereign expression of self. Doron, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, so excited to dive in today. We've already gone fairly deep just in our preliminary conversations. And so I want to start with a question to help us and help the audience know you a little better. What is it that you understand that the vast majority of people do not? And if they did understand this, that it would radically change their lives?
The most important thing that a person is actually looking for in their lives without really knowing it is what I call a godly state of singularity, and that is peace, inner peace. And what do I mean by a godly state of singularity? If you look at energies in their most primordial form, then everything can be brought down to either a state of singularity, which is a oneness without there being a second. And the other thing is duality, which implies another, meaning two people. And when you get into duality, you've got things like subject and object. You've got inside and outside. You've got fractions. You've got giver and receiver, connected and disconnected, all of these aspects of duality. And one of the most characterizing virtues, if you want to call it, or characteristics of duality is a verb. Because in a singularity, there is no verb. There is only being. And so there is an ultimate state of singularity that anyone can attain without doing anything, because in a singularity, there's no doing. And then there's the ultimate state of duality, which does imply and necessitate doing. So I'll start with the state of duality. The ultimate state of duality is fulfillment. And fulfillment is something so beyond just happiness. Because a person can engineer their perception in order to experience happiness. And all that is required to experience happiness is to perceive some sort of gain or some sort of pleasure, either to oneself or vicariously through a loved one or someone that you care about. So I can feel happy if I see that, let's say, my friend earns like a lot of money. Something good happens to a friend of mine, or my sports team wins. So I can experience happiness or joy. But fulfillment, you can't engineer fulfillment. Fulfillment requires an action, which means that there has to be another. And it's something so specific that is the culmination of a person's childhood, teen years, young adult life, and more mature adult life. It's basically the reason that you were created. So if you think about like an action that brings someone joy, let's say giving charity, if giving charity was all that was needed in order to experience the ultimate feeling of duality, then we could all just fill up our cars with like rolls and buns and food and go around and give out charity, and then we could all feel fulfilled. Now, while there is the gift of giving, which is a very, very important part of a healthy routine, that's not what fulfillment is made of. The structure of fulfillment is basically when I can identify the needs that I had as a child that went unmet, that leaves me with this almost bottomless pit, if you will. Because once a need is unmet after puberty, that need remains unmet and it can never truly be filled. Because if you think about it, if you do something over and over and over again, at some point you're going to get bored until it comes to your purpose and to fulfillment. That doing that over and over again only gets more exhilarating and you get better at it. And the person just gets lit up. And so we're neurologically wired to get exhilarated from doing our purpose over and over again, as opposed to getting bored. So in terms of duality, fulfillment is what we're going for. And the truth be told is that not everybody is going to make it to fulfillment. That's the sad truth.
Mhm.
It takes a lot of courage, a lot of work to look and to find the needs that I had that went unmet, primarily by my parents. And there's an inbuilt denial, and I'll explain why that is in a minute, but there's an inbuilt denial that sort of prevents me from being quote unquote real with myself to that degree, right? Because there's a lot of pain and we're designed to move away from pain. So that's in terms of duality, and it's structured, I think is a good word. But singularity,
May I ask a question?
sure.
So I just want you're explaining a bit why some people won't achieve that state of fulfillment is really just because it's challenging and we have to go through a lot of hard work to get there, but also is a part of that because it's a dualistic experience. Like there must be some people in order to experience something that someone else isn't, they have to not be experiencing it. So part of duality law is that I have one experience and someone else has another.
In duality, yes, everyone's got their own experience. Even two siblings with the exact same parents and seemingly the exact same childhood don't have the same parents and don't have the same childhood. So experience is always subjective, and just like everyone's got a completely different fingerprint, everyone's got their own experience. But um, the path towards fulfillment is marred with resistance.
Mm-hmm.
The most common thing that a person says when they sort of, let's say, identify without knowing that it's their purpose. Because one of the questions you got to ask yourself in pursuit of the purpose is, well, what would I do that is just fun for me? What would I do that I just love doing that I would do for free? And there are quite a few people that have an idea of what that is. I mean, once you get to the age of 30 or 40, you can look back in your life and you can sort of see, well, I love doing those things and I hate doing those things. And so what the negative self-talk, or what's known as the evil inclination, it's basically a tendency towards negativity, let's call it that, is that I'd love to be able to do X, Y, and Z, just there's no money in it. Or I'd love to do an X, Y, and Z, but it wouldn't be the responsible thing to do as an adult. Or I'd love to do X, Y, and Z, but I can't really make a living out of it. People wouldn't pay me for it. There's all of these like seemingly logical reasons why pursuing that thing is not the wise thing to do, responsible thing to do, savvy thing to do, mature thing to do. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's basically why a lot of people don't make it to this place of fulfillment, because on some level they've formed beliefs that it's not in their best interest. It's not the responsible thing to do. Does that answer your question, Jessica?
Yeah, kind of. It's like, if everyone was doing the things that it took to get to fulfillment, then everyone would be doing them. We wouldn't have the belief that it's hard. In order, like duality requires comparison because it's this or that. So there must be some people not.
I agree with that duality
Okay.
requires comparison.
Okay.
I think one of the aspects of duality is that each of the polarities define each other. So
Yeah. Okay.
hot wouldn't be hot if there wasn't cold, and cold wouldn't be cold if there wasn't hot. And not only that, my degree of sensitivity to hot is dependent on my experience of cold.
Yes.
So
Yes.
there's not really a comparison.
But it's by way of
That's the
something
definition.
being not something that it is what it is.
Well, if you look at like this, if you look at like an axis called temperature, of which the negative is cold and the positive is hot,
Mm-hmm.
can you say that the one isn't, but the other one is? Or they're just varying degrees of the same thing called temperature, which define each other?
Okay.
If we say, let's say $1 million, you go to a person that like they can barely make $5,000 a month, and you offer them $1 million and you say, would that make you rich or feel rich? They would say, yeah, hell yeah. You go to a billionaire, you say, you're left with $1 million. He's not gonna feel very rich.
Mm-hmm.
He's not gonna know how to like, he's not gonna know how to pay his electricity bill, because it's probably more than that in a year. So I
Mm-hmm.
don't know if it's about comparison. There is a relativity, and there is a definition of polarities when it comes to duality. I think comparison is something that the egoic mind does.
Mm-hmm.
Because what happens is that every person has what's called a shadow part of their mind, which is the their disowned part, their disowned self, their denied selves. One of the designs of this world is that things gravitate towards the light. We see it in nature in something called photosynthesis. And so this photosynthesis, or this gravitation towards the light, also exists within the human psyche. I call it emotional photosynthesis. And that is that I gravitate towards my light self-image. And if there's a gravitation towards a light self-image, then there is a moving away from my dark self-image. So, and we call that, if I'm moving towards something, that means I'm moving away from something. And in human terms, the moving away is called denial. It's not a conscious thing, it's an automatic thing. And that's why, like in shadow work, it's got to be facilitated, because you're moving against the flow, against the current, so to speak. And so what happens is that the shadow self expresses itself, or at least enough for a person to realize, okay, there's something beneath my conscious mind, and they sort of make space for this thing called shadow work. And then what's the clues of what to work with in shadow work are blockages. So let's say, for instance, an income ceiling, which happened to be my blockage, so I know it really well. An income ceiling can be suffocating. When a person works an entire month and barely has enough means to finish the month, pay the bills, lives in worry and anxiety all the time, it feels like a strangulation. And so that's one of the areas of blockages is personal income. So a person may not, well, most people don't know that what governs blockages are shadow aspects of the self. And that's how I'm able to help people into breakthrough, because we just find the right shadow aspects, shed some light there, bring it into the conscious mind, and start integrating that side, and then the blockages literally dissolve. So when a person is unaware of their own shadow self trying to get the person's attention in the form of certain blockages, it makes no sense. People with a money block are usually very capable individuals, reliable, dependable, good leaders, good managers, but there's just something missing and it makes no sense. The same thing is, let's say, if a person can't get into a relationship, which is another one of the blockages, they're usually pretty good looking people with like decent income, usually pretty stable. And for some reason, just like something's sort of missing, something's not clicking. The same thing with the chronic health issues, that these are people with a really wonderful attitude for the most part, and a great sort of like joy of life. Something keeps on keeping them from this internal health on a level of like chronic illness, chronic health or chronic illnesses. So what will happen is that a person with, let's say, a money block will look at a person who doesn't have a money block, but let's say has a relationship block or a health block. And because they don't know the structure of blockages, all they see is like, well, that person is not smarter than me. They're not any sort of, they're not like outdoing me anywhere. How come they can make money and I can't? And so that's where comparison comes in, when people don't understand how individual their life path has been designed for them. Because on a logical level, if I've got everything that you've got and you're doing well financially and I'm not, then it makes no sense. And so the comparison is something that happens on a level of the egoic mind, but not so much on a level of polarity and duality.
Yeah. Something that we see a lot of, and that I'm sure you see too, is there's this bias to this top-down problem-solving way of approaching our ability to earn money, our ability to have healthy relationships, or our ability to have vibrant health. And we compare and we look at other people. If I just copy and paste what they're doing into my life, then I'll have what they have. And that can work for a shorter period of time, but it's not sustainable. Those changes aren't actually consistent. So when you're working with your clients, how do you begin to break that belief that the way through is by logic and problem solving? How do you get a foot in the door and start to help them see another way, and that way being the journey within, being developing or an awareness of those shadows and learning how to work with them? How do you get them started on a path that doesn't make any rational sense?
Um, First and foremost, I teach them about the human equation, which is be, do, have. Um, I go into it very, very deeply. I'm not the first person to speak about be, do, have. I mean, just off the top of my head, James Clear talks about it in Atomic Habits. A lot of people know about be, do, have. I think that people don't quite um, understand how it fits into the human psyche and how the being is actually like the unconscious part, while the do and the have is simply cause and effect. So I explained to them the human equation, and I explained to them how, if you want to understand this world and how nature works, you have to understand how technology works, because godliness, or the force behind creation, is as precise as technology. And if a person has the right paradigm and the right building blocks of perception, then all of a sudden things that didn't make sense, or at least logical sequences, begin to change. So I explained that, first of all. I explained what transformation looks like in a very technical way so people can understand it. And then, this is probably the most important thing, I explained to people the power and the true definition of what a belief is. Because what you spoke about, that when people try to copy and paste a certain sequence of actions, like just do this like he does it, or just do this like he does that. At the moment, I think one of the big things that are going around is Alex Hormozy, where he just says, just do this, just do that. And for the most part, like, he speaks truth. He's not making up anything, and he actually has got nothing new. Really, he's got nothing new. He just got really, really, really good at the basics. But he also talks about beliefs. A belief is basically a mechanism or a program that creates a reality. So whatever's going on in your life, that's basically the projection or the manifestation of beliefs that you have. And for the most part, when a person is experiencing either a pattern or some form of reality that is limiting, meaning that they don't have the freedom of movement in order to achieve what they want, I'd say 99, if not 100% of the time, there are beliefs that they have that are literally simply manifesting. There's a few ways I like to explain beliefs. I like to call beliefs the wallpaper of your reality. Literally. So if you live in a house and there's wallpaper and there's a pattern on the wallpaper, then those are beliefs, because the wallpaper is not the wall. It's simply the coloring or the decoration or what's giving flavor to the wall. And so whatever it is that you believe, that whatever beliefs you formed at a young age, those become the building blocks of a person's reality. Like if the world was made of Lego, then every single block of Lego in a person's view is basically one of their beliefs. I don't know if you guys, some people have seen it. It's probably the most accurate description or metaphor. There was a Star Trek called The Next Generation. Are you familiar with it?
No.
So in Star Trek, The Next Generation, it was the captain was Jean-Luc Picard, who was Professor X in the X-Men. Yeah, he was the captain, and on this spaceship, there was a room called the holodeck. And this holodeck was basically, before you go in, you'd say, "Computer, please create the following scene," and you'd just give it a time and a place, and it would literally create a tactile experience, like full senses. They would have training modules, and if you got hit in the training modules, like, you'd walk out of there like injured. But in the middle of and you could walk forever. You could like go for like a 10-day hike in this holodeck, in this room. But if at some point during your experience you said "computer end program," the whole thing would just go boo, and you'd find yourself in a room, not a very big room, a room with these panels. And these panels were, well, let's call them magical panels. And once you put a program, like you gave an order to the program to create a certain surrounding or a certain environment, those panels would turn into the reality. So that's probably, those panels are beliefs. That's really the best way to explain it. And when a person realizes that they're a living, breathing mechanism that is part computer and part cinema. Yeah, do you remember the cinemas before there was digital screens? There was a projection room with a reel, and then the reel would go like onto like this projected lights, and then that would come onto the screen, and that's what we'd watch. And so the human being is literally like part computer and part cinema. And everything that's going on in a person's life is actually subject to change, just like a computer is and just like the cinema is. The question is, at what point in a person's life do they reach the realization that this can happen? And in that same breath, find the right person, book, or experience in order to make that knowledge available and implementable.
Yeah, you mentioned when we were talking before we started recording that, that your first decade of exploring some of this stuff was learning a lot of information, but it didn't quite create, then what? Or the actionable steps. And I was thinking that as you were painting this picture for us of this Star Trek room of, okay, I can be aware that I'm in this room and maybe even say, program off or whatever. But in our experiences, awareness isn't enough. I can be aware that I have this belief, but then how do we change that?
Oh, well, that's basically why you've got professionals. That's why you've got people that, because I can point you in the right direction, but it's a little bit, let's call it structured. So just
Hmm.
to answer your question, so that the listeners can just get something to bite into. First and foremost, it is about awareness. It really is. First and foremost, it is about awareness. Even if a person becomes aware that they have a belief without actually realizing or knowing it or seeing it, a person can, like for instance, if I were to say, and anyone listening, just do this. How do you find, or how do you know if you have a negative belief or a limiting belief? How do you know this? Because they don't hurt. When you got a toothache, there's no confusion there. When you got a headache, there's no confusion because it hurts and that pain draws your attention towards that limb or that part of your body. But a belief doesn't hurt. So how do you find something that is essentially like not calling you? It's not averting your attention. And it's very simple, actually. You think of anything in your life that you really want and that you've wanted for a while. And if you still don't have it, you have a negative belief or a limiting belief. It is as simple as that. Now, when a person goes through that process of, let's call it deduction or elimination, and the person can say, okay, well, let's just use the one that's most common. Like, let's say I don't have enough money. So if I want something, and just by virtue of a human being wanting something, it causes the same type of dynamic as a black hole in space. I'll explain what I mean. In space, everything's moving at its last inertia. So because there's no resistance in space in terms of oxygen, like right now, because there's oxygen everywhere, there's resistance. Even a bullet has to move through the air, and it has a ballistic arch, but it doesn't go on forever. At some point, it slows down and falls on the ground, just like it would underwater. Just underwater, you can see the water, so you can see the resistance. But in space, there's no resistance. That means that whatever caused the last force, the object is moving in that state of inertia, and there's nothing to stop it. Does that make sense? So everything in space is moving at its last inertia, and it
Hmm.
requires something else, a new force, for it to stop that inertia and for it to change directions or dynamics. So in space, when a black hole forms, all of a sudden there's a new point of, let's call it, of that suction. There's that new vortex that's pulling things in. So if, let's say, this was moving over here because of its lost inertia, I don't know how long ago, and all of a sudden over here there was a black hole, this black hole now becomes a point of absorption. There's a suction, there's a force bringing it towards here. So this will now move towards this point over here. Okay. So when a human being wants something, our level of, let's call it, inherent divinity and our connection to the system is one that our divine, let's call it rights, and it's not even a right, it's just something that happens automatically. It's like a divine inheritance. At the very fact that we want something, the entire universe begins to respond to that, because us and the system, we're essentially not separate. The very sort of, let's call it the atoms that fill up the entire universe, I'm part of those also. What makes up my skin are atoms, just like what makes up the air, what makes up the table, what makes up the screen. So there's no, when you look at things from an atomic level, there's no separation between me, the air, the mountain, the trees. So there's me inside the system. And the only thing that makes me feel separate is my level of consciousness. And so when a person wants something, just that simple fact that I want something, then I become much like the black hole in space. That I become a point of collection. I become a point of direction, that things start to make their way towards me just by virtue of the fact that I want it. Okay, let's call it, I'm able to attract what I want in let's call it magnetic attraction. It's really polar attraction, but I begin to pull things in. There's a magnetic attraction. There's also resonance attraction. You know, people talk about the law of attraction. Yeah, there's no law called attraction. It's a phenomenon, but it's not a law, simply because there's two. There's polar attraction, negative and positive, and there's resonance attraction, positive and positive, negative and negative. It can't be a law if there's two types of attraction, but it definitely is a phenomenon. And the law of attraction that people are talking about is the law. It's a function of vibration, which is resonant attraction. Okay, your vibe attracts your tribe, type of thing. Yeah. So by very virtue of the fact that I want something, I begin to put it into my experience, unless I have a belief that is opposed to it, and it literally just goes no. It literally just goes no. So when a person is able to identify that, like, okay, I really want X, Y, or Z, and I've wanted it for a while, and I still don't have it, guys, listeners, everyone, trying harder is not the answer. Sorry to tell you. And that's a big one. That's a big, big, big one to swallow. A big one to swallow. Because the world is inundated with rah, rah, rah motivational books. And you gotta try harder. You gotta sleep when you're done and not when you're tired. You know, you got like these and they're nice to listen to. And there is place for motivation, 100%. 100%. But if you have a mental block, trying harder is simply not going to bring it into your life, because breakthrough is the result of a healing process. And so now, to answer your question, now that I've given that like a little soapbox introduction, when you identify that you have a limiting belief or a negative belief, and I separate between a negative belief and a limiting belief because they are completely, completely different. A negative belief is not something that I can talk about now in a way that a person can understand what to do, because it's essentially shadow work and the integration of shadow work. And that is a process in itself, a very grueling process, a very demanding process, but arguably the most important work that a person can do, because what is more important than me discovering my own self? Integrating a negative belief, and the negative beliefs are the I am something negative. I am not good enough. I am a loser. I am not worthy. I am a failure. I am whatever. All the negative I ams. Those are negative beliefs. They're core beliefs, and they are as important to the human being as the roots are to a tree or as a foundation is to a building. Without the negative beliefs, you cannot and would not be any of the positive polarities. So, for instance, someone that has a belief that I'm a failure is actually, on the outside to everyone else, an inspiration. someone that is not good enough feels like I'm not good enough, they are really phenomenal in terms of likability somewhere in their life. Every single bodybuilder and bodybuilders, I'm really sorry to break this to you. I know you didn't ask for this. I'm going to give it anyway. Bodybuilders who are very strong have a negative belief called I'm weak or I'm helpless. 100% of them, 100%. Because it's impossible that that to reach such level of physical strength, and obviously everyone knows how much mental strength it requires also, it's impossible to reach that positive of being strong without the origin, the seed, the negative being its polar opposite of I'm weak. It's not just that they come together. The negative not only comes before the positive, it actually creates the positive, just like the arrow in the bow. The arrow in the bow, what the archer does, all the archer does is creates a negative tension. That's it. And once he lets go, the natural laws of the universe take care of the rest. But the only input that the archer does is a negative input. And for those of us that are over 30 and remember Kodak pictures, the exact same thing is true. In fact, the whole human can be compared to the development of Kodak or Fuji pictures. And how did it start? The photographer wants to capture an object. He points the camera and he presses the button, and then there is a flash of light. And this is really important, that it's a flash of light, but it's a flash of light that creates an imprint. And what do we call the film that goes into the camera? Do you guys remember?
The negatives, right?
Exactly. The negatives. And what happens is that on the negative film, there is a negative imprint that is polar, meaning it's opposite, also in direction. So the right hand goes up, it'll look like the left hand in the negative. And there's also an entire polarity in terms of lights and shade, colors. And so once the film is complete, we would take this negative film to a developer, and he would develop in a what room? A dark room, where there's lots of shadow.
Darkness. Yeah.
And then from there, he would invert the negative. So you take the negative, which is deep, and inverts it into the positive, almost like a contractor or a builder going to the foundations of a building that are deep, and then like inverting them into this high building, or the arrow from the negative into the positive. So basically, the whole point about shadow integration is that without the negative, there can be no positive. Without the contraction, there can be no expansion. And this is not a comfort or a consolation. This is a universal law. It cannot be, it has never been any different. And once a person understands that my entire childhood wounding, the reason that my mother didn't love me the way that I wanted her to love me, or the reason that my father abandoned me when I needed him the most, and the reason that I've got all of this childhood pain is because that was the negative. It's what Carl Jung referred to as wounding. The axiom when it comes to wounding is where I am the most wounded, I am the most accomplished. And all you need to do to reach that high level of accomplishment because of your wounds, all you need to do is stay alive. That's it. I stuttered really badly as a child from age 5 till age 8. Out of nowhere. It was like the stuttering fairy came and like hit my lips, and I started stuttering like uncontrollably in a really like exaggerated way. And lo and behold, as an adult, the words come out of my mouth, let's call it in a higher than average form. And it's not despite my stuttering, it's because of my stuttering. So going back to the original question that you asked, negative beliefs, the I ams, they need to be integrated because they have a polarity. Whereas a limiting belief is a belief about the world. It's about how I formed, or how my model of reality, my internal map of this world, how it gets formed. And unless you study universal laws, which is sort of one of my missions in this world, is to teach people enough universal laws in a way that's easy to understand so that they can develop and design a modeled reality that's built on truth and not perceptions or experience. It's like trying to use a GPS that's like 20 years old and outdated. The chances of you reaching your destination, not so high, at least not quickly. So this is what I try to do, is try to explain universal laws in a way that people understand the truth, and they can create a model of reality that is based on the truth, and adjust accordingly, and obviously adjust their expectations. But when it comes to a limiting belief like money is hard to make, all the good guys are taken, women are bad, money is dangerous, success ruins people, yeah, those are limiting beliefs. And they have no polarity. They are simply misunderstandings. They're simply misunderstandings. And there's no integrating of a limiting belief. You just got to like correct the misunderstanding. So, how to do it? With a negative belief, if you're not going to go for shadow work, which I highly, highly, highly recommend that you do, and that you prepare yourself and that you be ready, because the change that comes after shadow work I could speak and speak and speak about miracles, and people still wouldn't really grasp like the degree of the miraculous nature of breakthrough when you start to integrate shadow aspects. But essentially, if you feel that I'm not good enough and nothing seems to make it go away, then all you got to say to yourself is, okay, I'm not good enough. Also, but I'm also phenomenal somewhere else. If you got this belief that I'm a failure, okay, fine. While you're looking at yourself as a failure because you started something and it didn't finish it the way that you hoped, and then you started something again and it didn't work out the way you wanted to, and you started again and it didn't work out the way you wanted to, and you started again and it didn't work out the way you wanted to, most people will look at the end result and go, well, I failed again. I'm a failure. Whereas everyone else doesn't really give a flying rat's whatever about how you finish, because they're so engrossed in their own story and their own self. The only thing that they notice is that you got up, you dusted yourself off, and you tried again. That's the only thing that people really notice, because they're so involved in their own lives. And I don't know about you, but when I see someone dust themselves off and try again for the fourth, fifth, and sixth time, I think failure is going to be the one word that I'm never going to use. And I'm probably going to use the word inspiration, because that's damn inspiring when a person can just get up and try again. And so here in the very same thing, in the very same scenario, where a person looked at the end and said, I'm a failure, everyone else in their life is looking at the beginning and saying, you're an inspiration. And these are the polarities. These are the dualities. It's just that the negative, if you notice, the archer pulls back the arrow about 70 centimeters, yeah, about 2.5, 3 feet. But when he lets go, it doesn't fly 70 centimeters. It flies hundreds of meters. So that means that the ratio or the relationship between the negative and the positive is not 1-to-1. It's like it's 1-to-500. There's actually verses in the Torah that actually like tell us these things so we can work them out. Because until I became sort of like super Jew, I didn't know any of these things to this degree. But the fact of the matter is that the negative is potent, and so it hurts so much more. So a person can have a lot of successes in life, and they can have a lot of accolades, and they can get a lot of compliments and praises from the people around them, and still go to bed at night feeling like a failure, feeling like not good enough, feeling like a fraud. It's a big one. People talk about the imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome is when a person feels that like everyone's giving me all of these accolades, and inside they don't know that like I hate myself, or that I'm, everyone calls me beautiful, but I feel ugly. Everyone says to me, you're amazing, but I feel not good enough. Everyone tells me I'm inspiring, but I feel like I'm a failure. And it's that sort of contrast between the positive that people are seeing on the outside versus the negative that I feel on the inside, which feels so potent, that this contrast, if you don't have a framework to say, So like I'm temperature and I've got hot and cold inside of me, or I'm Doron-Yitzchak and I've got a left hand and I've got a right hand and they're still me. So until a person has the actual, like, let's call it frameworks of universal laws, let's call it the truth, so they can see, hold on a second, I'm not screwed up. I've just got polarities. And all of a sudden there's this legitimization to say like, okay. And then I go into it even deeper with shadow work, is that the I'm not good enough and the I'm a failure and all of that. That's all the residence. It's the home. It's the residence of the inner child. Because when a person connects to a shadow belief, let's say I'm not good enough, and I say really connect to it, really connect to it, allow it to be true. And I ask them, how old do you feel? It's always the inner child. It's always the inner child. But the person that's the inspiration and the person that's doing all of these amazing things, that's the adult. And so if you look at it in terms of the bow and the arrow, everyone knows that the flight of the arrow is completely not only dependent on, but a result of the time that the arrow spent in the bow, in the negative tension. And so the person that's doing all these amazing things in the world is an adult, because children don't interact with the world unless you create a Thunberg. And then you've got like a nice script. But essentially, children don't interact with the world. Adults interact with the world. And so to give people something to do without necessarily diving into the depths of shadow work, is just understand that, like, when you're shouting at yourself, when you're berating yourself, you're not speaking to the adult in the mirror. You're not shouting at yourself like at eye level. You're actually, people don't know this, and it's a little bit jolting to hear this, but it's true. You're actually speaking downwards to a little child that's like doing this. And just having that visual of like, oh wow, so when I'm berating myself and when I'm shouting at myself and I'm being really mean to myself, I'm not being mean to the adult in the mirror. I'm being mean to a little child that can't talk back, that can't answer back. And so ultimately, in terms of a metaphor, the integration is when the adult can go to the child and say, you know what? It's true. You're not good enough. I'm not going to say that it's a lie, because everyone says it's lies, it's a false belief. You've got to shout louder. If a child has something to say and gets ignored, then that child is denied validity. And when a child is denied validity, which is self-value, then they're not able to give it to themselves. And that's where people pleasing comes from, where people start to say yes too much to other people, because essentially on an unconscious level, they're looking for that validation. They're looking for that compliment. And because the self-value is so low, the distance between me and myself is so deep and like this never-ending pit, and my desire and my need for this external validation is also endless. It's also endless. A person doesn't go, okay, I've done enough people pleasing, I've got enough compliments, I'm going to stop that now. That doesn't happen. So when a person can in their minds can understand that there's this dynamic, there's a relationship, that at the end of this relationship, once the shadow parts are integrated, it's basically the adult saying to the inner child, the smaller me, it's like, yeah, okay, you're not good enough, but I'm phenomenal. And I'm phenomenal because of you. You think you're a failure, but here's me changing the world and inspiring people without even trying. And people come in and they thank me for being me. I mean, imagine that. When a person says you're an inspiration, what are they saying? They're saying like, you just being you just living your life just the way you are. You've made me want to be a better person. I mean, is there any bigger compliment that a person can just give to someone else? And so this is this conversation that gets had with this child. You say like, you believe you're a failure. Okay. I'm not going to dismiss you. I'm not going to say it's a lie, it's a lie, it's a lie. I hear you. I hear you. But I want you to know, and this is key, I want you to know that it wasn't in vain. All of that pain that you've been carrying for so long, and the nothingness that you feel, and the heartache, and the everything ache, the desire to not want to live anymore, which I know in America you can't say this out loud, But a lot of people are not suicidal, but they're like, dude, like, God, I didn't sign up for this. I did not sign up for this. I'm a person that essentially loves life, but like, I, I, I don't want to live like this. I don't want this life if this is what it's going to look like. And you know what? It's okay, guys. It's all right. Whoever's felt that, I promise you, we've all felt that. I'm blessed to live a very, very fulfilled life, and I went through that also. And this conversation, when the person realizes like it's not me, it's a part of me. And it wasn't for nothing, because without the negative, I wouldn't have the positive. It's almost like oh, okay. So my childhood was basically like Texas Rangers boot camp, and now I'm like the toughest dude on the planet because of like what I went through. And there's this reconciliation that can happen, that has to happen. It has to happen. That's why I say that shadow work, I believe, to be the ultimate work for any human being, because when I can discover my own self, it's like, imagine at age 3, I did a mistake with my left hand. And then unconsciously, I mean, at the time it was conscious, but I forgot about it already. I decided, okay, this hand is bad. It made a mistake. I'm never going to use it ever again. Okay. And everyone did this. So everyone's walking around with their left hand behind their back. Sorry, lefties. This is a like left-handed people. You can use right hand for this. So basically, everyone's walking around with their weaker hand behind their back. And then at some point in some process of self-discovery, they discover, oh my gosh, I got this hand. It stinks a little bit. It hasn't been washed in a while, but like, it's me. It's me. I actually have another hand. How much would a person's life change if after 30, 40, 50 years, they discover, oh my gosh, I've got another hand and it fits, everything fits, like they work together. It'd be the most life-changing thing that a person can ever go through. And that's basically what shadow integration is about. And the last thing I'll say is that with the limiting beliefs, you can really just explore the limiting belief. So if a limiting belief is like money is hard to make, which a lot of people got that, you can actually just like start challenging that belief, because it's simply a misunderstanding. It's not a core belief. It's not part of you. It doesn't need integrating. It has no polarity. It's a simple misunderstanding that can be corrected if you just give it some attention and start like saying, hold on a second, where did that come from? Is that really true? Where are there examples about where this doesn't come from, or where it's not true? And that's basically just so that your listeners something to chew on. There are people like myself and other coaches and healers that do this for a living and can get it done in a really, really short amount of time. So if the person's like considering it, I would highly, highly, highly recommend doing work on the level of beliefs. And if anybody wants a book that they can look at these things, there's a book by the name of a guy called John DeMartini. He's got a book called The Breakthrough Experience, and he draws out and really like guides people through these things in a book. And please God, very soon at some point my book will be ready too. But at the moment, I can John DeMartini, he does great work.
It's a really powerful thing for all humans to understand, and especially men, that it's not about killing that belief or exterminating that part of me. And that's often the brute force approach that guys arrive into this work of, I can't think that way. Oh, that belief is there again. I'm just going to ignore it and push it away. And the less attention that we try to give it, the louder it becomes, the more it clamors for our attention. And so that bridge from I need to get rid of it to I need to integrate it is exceptionally important. And the last thing I'll say here is we've heard of quantum leaps. If you haven't heard of quantum leaps, it's when your life changes in a moment. You know, you get a wire for $10,000, or something shifts in your life, and the next day you meet your life partner. And I'm wondering your perspective on this, because there's two perspectives. There's you change the belief, and then there's a quantum leap, and the next day I get $20,000 to my bank account. And then there's a perspective where I change the belief, and it takes some time for my three-dimensional world to catch up to my 5D. I have to put in that hard work that Hormozi preaches. So I'm curious in your work if you see both with clients that have breakthroughs, or if it is more the quantum leaps, or if it is more the lagging and the catching up of the external reality.
Excellent question. Excellent question. It comes down to logistical infrastructure. So I'll explain what I mean. If a person, like when I work with people that have infrastructures, meaning that they have a business, they have let's call it logistical channels for abundance to make their way to them, then the breakthrough can happen, like shadow integration can happen, the shadow enactment can happen, which is like the difficult part, and the breakthrough can happen, and it all happens in 3 months or less. When the person has the infrastructure, like you've got a business, it's established, you know what you're doing, people know who you are, and basically you can build people. So when that happens, like logistically, the breakthrough is like there are channels for the abundance to make its way to you. When a person doesn't have an infrastructure, then they become the person that can then create that infrastructure. And now creating an infrastructure is a long and tedious, it's the most expensive part of a business. And if a person doesn't have an infrastructure, then that quantum leap, or that amazing thing that happened, it may be elusive. What I have seen with people is that when they move into these higher bandwidths of vibrational frequencies, they move into higher B2Havs, that if they don't have an infrastructure, then the abundance comes in forms of gifts and tax rebates and different types of returns and specials, discounts, those type of things. So every now and again you hear about someone getting a big check in the mail, but I definitely wouldn't say that that's the norm. I definitely wouldn't say to someone that comes to work with me that you might just get a big check in the mail, because like that's not really realistic. But if a person comes to me and they've got a business and it's established, I can pretty much, and I use this word loosely and carefully, I can pretty much predict what's going to happen in their business. Having done this work for over a decade, you get to sort of see so many studies that it's sort of the mysteriousness begins to sort of like become less. Infrastructure really is the main thing. Sometimes a person's breakthrough is simply having the guts to follow their passion, because we spoke about it in a chat beforehand, that sometimes a person is aware of what they'd love to do, but there's all these voices saying that, oh, there's no money in it, to leave my corporate job would be irresponsible, and a lot of dream killing takes the disguise of mature responsibility. I remember when I was at my dead end job, making my way to the bottom of my barrel, I hated every single minute of it. I had a very degrading job. Well, at least for me, it was degrading, because I used to be an entrepreneur, and then I found myself opening and closing a gate with a remote control. But there's a lot more details there, but the bottom line is like that's like pizza people make pizzas and dishwashers wash dishes. I would go to this place and open and close a gate with a remote control. Like that's basically it. And it was quite a big fall from grace for me. But I didn't leave that place, and I stayed there with my crippling anxiety and my depression and everything else, because I had bills to pay. And I hear this all the time, that to leave what I'm doing and to start following my passion would not be a responsible thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
And it's that sort of like, it's really an illusion. It's really an illusion, but it feels so real. I mean, the way illusions do. So what might happen in breakthrough when a person integrates their shadow self, or aspects of their shadow self that govern the blockages that they're experiencing, is that they just simply have the guts, have the courage to start following their heart and start following what they love doing, despite the fact that they may be giving up something that seems lucrative and like the responsible thing to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, these things really work like law, but the only way that to understand or believe them sometimes is getting that first shift of like, oh, I finally have the courage to make the change. And then, you're seeing it more with clients, but also we see it more in our own lives of, okay, this change seems terrifying, but I know now what it feels like when I'm having this type of contracture, when I have to harness the courage to make this change. Like I'm familiar now that this is the law, that there's a contracture before the expansion, and that I just simply have to go through this process to like come out the other side. But that first one or the first few, you don't really have that repetition built. Like it really is just a trust or a hitting rock bottom or finding the right mentor, or maybe a little bit of all three to be able to make that first shift. Mm. Um, how else did I jam that one moment? Mm.
It's really scary when a
Mm-hmm.
person is going through a contraction and things are falling apart.
Mm-hmm.
It's really, really scary. And what I've found, this is going to sound crazy, but it's really true. What I found is that when a person's going through a very, very, very tough time in their lives, and it feels like the contraction is never ending, and that's it. Like there's no end in sight, there's no light at the end of the tunnel. To find peace in that space is very, 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 very difficult.
Mm-hmm.
And the only way that a person can find peace in such a difficult space where nothing is going right and everything seems to be going wrong, when a person is in the depths of terror and they feel that like nothing good can happen, I'm stuck and it'll never be any different, and everyone's doing okay except for me.
Mm-hmm.
And in order to reach that singularity of peace, in order to get to a state of peace, you don't have to do anything. That's what makes it an ultimate state of singularity, because you don't have to do anything to be at peace. You just got to be okay with everything. And if you're okay with everything, then but there's some things that a person just cannot be okay with. It's not okay that I'm broke. It's not okay that I'm stuck. It's not okay that I'm not in a relationship. It's all of these not okayness. And so we were talking about the illusion of adult responsibility, and why I have to do the responsible thing and stay at this job so that I can pay my bills and business on time and have the financial security that everyone talks about. Whereas I'd love to be like making money doing what I love, but it's a pipe dream. And what I tell people is that in a responsible way, you have to stop caring in a responsible way, because caring is basically me forcing a certain significance to a result that I have, a result that I want that I don't have. So if I'm broke, let's say, it's so not okay for so many reasons that I've allocated all of the significance to my bank balance. And if that's not okay, then this is not okay, and there's like this domino effect of not okay. Whereas if a person basically stops caring, again, in a responsible way, I'm not talking about like, you know, sleeping until noon and like not watching, what you put in your mouth, but removing care. It's called detachment. I mean, everyone knows about detachment, but again, what do you do with detachment? And so I like to give the human step one, step two, step three. Like, what does it feel like? What does detachment feels like? It feels like not caring. That's what it feels like. If you want to like go into detachment, you have to find the place where I care so much about a certain result, and you have to stop caring. And that literally is the quickest way to peace. Again, it's a paradox. It's like this like illusion that is so hard to break out of, because if I stop caring, then that means that I'm irresponsible. And that's why I say, in a responsible way, do what you can. Do always. I believe in excellence. I live excellence. But that's in myself, in my own self-mastery, that I wake up when I'm supposed to wake up. I do what I'm supposed to do. I prepare things. And, the excellence is crucial. It's crucial. But I cannot control a result. I cannot control the final result. I can do everything that I want, that I should be doing. And I should care really much about what it is that what I do and my intention. But in terms of the actual result itself, if I cannot change it, then pushing harder is not the answer. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to get into a state of peace. And why is peace so important? Because it's what I call an unencumbered level of vibration. What I mean by unencumbered, if a person is in the red, if they're like $200,000 in debt, for them to have $0 in their bank account is a massive, massive, massive improvement. Yeah. It's the first part that's called in the black as opposed to in the red. And so if a person's in this place of they're like $200,000 in the red, then just to get to that 0 point, that like break even point where they don't have any more debt, let's call that peace. So if a person can make their way to peace, that peace becomes the very building ground. It's the foundation of anything that you want to build, because the most creative you is a peaceful you. The most motivated you is a peaceful you. The best you is a peaceful you.
One of the images that I'll use when I'm working with people on like this attachment idea for the things that they want is, if I'm gripping onto your arm so hard that I'm making you bleed because all I want to do is hang out with you, impulsive reaction is to like try to get away from me. And the laws of the universe work the same. Like if I'm gripping onto something so hard, the natural reaction is to be repelled by that sensation of like so much intense attachment, too much caring about the outcome, all of these things. But something that feels hard sometimes is like detaching and also still being open. Like it's easy to stop caring or to stop putting so much weight on something or to detach from something and go cold. But how to detach and also stay open?
Well, you do that through gratitude.
Hmm.
You do that through gratitude. And gratitude is the basis of abundance. Because in order for me to be grateful when I don't have what I want, I have to focus on everything that I already have. And a lot of people have normalized what they have, and have formed ambitions purely based on the fact that I don't have it. And when an ambition gets formed from a place of lack, then the only thing that can be perpetuated is more lack. It can't be any other way. If you look at, let's say, a cup that is, let's say, you guys work in ounces. So let's say there's a cup that's like 10 ounces, and inside there's like only 6 ounces of, let's call it, water. So there's 4 ounces of empty cup. Now, you've got the optimist and the pessimist, and the whole sort of like perspectives that you can call a positive perspective or a negative perspective. The glass is half full, the glass is half empty. But just from a realist point of view, there is simply more cup than liquid. That's it. Now, if that cup and the liquid was a human being, meaning the cup is the context, it's my desires, and the liquid is already what I have. It's the content. If I was to embody that, and most people aren't because they feel that they don't have enough, so their cup is not full. And so society says, it's cool. It's cool. You just don't call the empty parts lack. Call it ambition, and then you're sweet. And that's simply not true. Because if the ambition is born out of lack, then even when the cup gets filled up, what happens? The cup becomes bigger again. Because people have learned that ambitions are good and you have to be ambitious. The thing is, the nuance here is that if the ambition is formed out of lack, then on your deepest internal level, you're always going to feel like either a half empty or a half empty cup. Whereas the truth is that in order to get to the place of peace, and this is sort of way having access to like the holy tongue of like, it's not really Hebrew, the holy tongue, the original source code, is that the word for peace is shalom. I'm sure everybody knows that, right? It's like one of the only Hebrew words that everyone knows. But the word for complete is shalem. And it's basically the same word or the same root. And so when I can reach this place where I feel full of my content, then I get to experience peace. And we even call that, when a person is so happy with what they got, they say that I feel very content. It's the exact same word. I'm so full of my content that I feel content. And that's a vibration. And let me tell you something, that the universe is not listening to your story. The universe is not looking at the brave smile that you're putting on your face. The universe is listening to your vibration the same way that you listen to a symphony when you go to a theater or you go to listen to a symphony orchestra. You listen to it. You get to enjoy the harmony and the symphony through your ears. And if one instrument is not tuned, they're not all tuned to the same tone, the same note. You cannot fake that. The person with the instrument that is not tuned the same note as everyone else, it will sound not harmonious. And there's nothing that the musician can do to make that sound harmonious. And the same thing is that the universe is listening to your vibration, not looking at the face that you're putting on or the story that you're trying to tell yourself. It's listening, and you can't fake that. And so when it comes to peace, guys, listeners, this is the most important thing in your life, because if you can truly, truly reach that place of peace, it doesn't matter if you make your cup smaller. If your cup and the content are equal, then you're in 100%. You're in a space of completeness, and that doesn't become an end result. That becomes a cause for which the effect is more content in order for you to carry on feeling that, and that's basically abundance when the cup overflows, when there's more content than cup. And that's true abundance. And that can only happen when you form ambitions out of abundance. And what does that look like? What does that look like in terms of the ABC? Well, if a couple have got kids, they say they've got 2 kids, and I say to them, if everything was right, if you had the resources and you had everything, would you want more kids? And I've yet to meet someone that says no. They all say, yes, of course. And I say to them, well, do you want more kids because 2 is not enough? And they go like, no. It's like, what? It's like that thought is almost like it doesn't compute. Not enough? No, it's just that 2 is such a blessing, that to have more of those blessings would just be phenomenal. But if I don't, I'm happy with my 2. And that's what detachment is where whether I get what I want or I don't, I'm going to be fine anyway. Because guys, people are like, they're really scared of the worst case scenario. Yeah. Like if a person's battling financially and they go like, oh my gosh, at the end of this, I'll be sleeping under a bridge. The truth is that if that were to happen, if you were to lose everything and find yourself sleeping under a bridge, you know what? You know what would need to happen from there? You need to come to terms with it. You need to accept it. You need to find peace there and then start building. So whatever happens, there's no running away from this. You're going to have to find peace. You're going to have to accept what's going on in your life. You're going to have to stop fighting it, find this deep peace, and build from there, because there is nothing else that is truly sustainable. How do you scare a person that's not scared of losing everything? They're untouchable. And the paradox is that if you can be okay with the worst case scenario, you've already won. You've already won. You've won in the place where it's the most difficult to win, because when a person fears an irrational fear, it seems like the end of the world. And the only way to get around that is just to be okay with the worst case scenario, and that way you release yourself from the fear.
Yeah. The ability to tolerate paradox is superpower. It's also what I term as spiritual maturity. And one of the biggest paradoxes that people have a hard time is, you were mentioning being content with life. And it's one of the 8 limbs of yoga. This ancient system for self-realization is Santosha, contentedness. And where people slip is, oh, if I'm content, then I'm complacent. If I'm content, then I can't want more. But the paradox that we have to learn to tolerate and integrate, and the inner conflict that we need to end, is I'm content and I also want more. I love your example of the kids. I have 2 kids and we want more, not because it's not enough, because it's so great that if we are blessed and fortunate enough to have another one, we happily receive that, and it's okay if we just have 2. That's great as well. There you are. And another thing was ringing in my ears from Eastern texts from the Bhagavad Gita, as we were talking about non-attachment, is, surrender the fruits of your action and act for the action's sake. There's the axiom of it's about the journey, not the destination. These things ring throughout all cultures, even modern culture. And still, it's such a hard thing for a lot of people to integrate. So I think that conversation was really valuable. And I'm going to switch gears here. You've been referencing universal laws throughout this whole conversation, and you teach 10 of them. And there's one that I want to dive deeper into, and that's the law of gender. And so tell us what the law of gender is.
Sure. Just want to make a little correction that I teach 7.
There's 7 universal laws and then 3 internal. Is that?
So what happens is, but those those internal laws, I call them, they're on the page of the law. They're on the diagram called the laws, but they're not universal. They're more like
Right.
operating systems within the human being.
Okay.
And an operating system within that device is sort of like the law. Like if you've got a MacBook and you do something that is not lawful, it'll go ding. It just means like within this system, we cannot execute that because it's not within the laws. And so the 3 operating systems, they are on the page of the laws, but they're not universal. I suppose they are universal.
Right.
Yeah. All right. So the law of gender is basically the law that governs the interaction between the masculine energy and the feminine energy. It's also called the law of creation, because in order for there to be any form of creation, there has to be a unification or a union between a masculine energy and a feminine energy. Now, it's really important, especially for Americans, because like I get this the most with Americans. You guys are the most influenced by let's call it woke culture, which is sort of like trying to challenge these universal paradigms and give them legitimization. But in terms of simply the laws, everything is created either in a masculine energetic form or a feminine energetic form. And I can give a few examples. Before I do that, it's important to understand the nature of this interaction. So, in essence, the masculine principle is the principle that gives. Okay, that's it. The feminine principle is the principle that receives. That's it. There's more, but essentially, in order for creation to happen, a masculine principle must give of itself. A feminine principle will receive into herself, and depending on the species, will hold it for a while, and then there'll be a creation. Okay? So even the wokest person cannot deny this, is that when we look at, let's say, human species, the masculine principle that is in the form of a man, because even women have masculine energies inside of them. Everything has got masculine and feminine energies. So in species, the masculine principle gives of himself in the form of seed, whether it's humans or animals, even certain flowers. The feminine principle receives the seed into herself, into what we call an egg, and then holds it for a while. We call that pregnancy. And then after a while, there's a whole thing, there's certain things that happen in the pregnancy or the gestation when it comes to nature and botany. And then there's creation. The masculine principle has a set of characteristics, and the feminine principle has a set of characteristics. I'll go through them just so that people understand this is not about men and women. So, for instance, the masculine principle is giving, and the feminine principle is receiving. So, when you think about, let's say, the brain has activity that we call electromagnetic. So, electro means giving because it is expansive, like the sun. Electro, it goes outwards. Magnetic means I pull into myself. So, electro, giving, magnetic, receiving. The fact that there is electromagnetic activity in the brain means that there is one hemisphere that is of masculine energy. We can call that the left brain, and it's analytical. And then you've got the right brain, which is the feminine energy. And let's call that, yeah, it's the right brain. Basically, the one thinks in stories and experience, and the other one thinks in terms and parts. So, for instance, in a car, a masculine energy, let's call it the engineer type of energy, really wants to know how everything's working. This goes into here, the petrol goes into there, from here it goes into this, and then that, and this happens, and then there's air, it comes together, and there's a mixture, and then there's an engine, and then there's a spark, and whatever, and then there's an exhaust pipe. And the feminine energy thinks about from the driver's seat, the experience of it. So you've got parts, masculine, and then you've got system or the whole picture or the experience, which is feminine. This has got nothing to do with men and women. So let's go through some of the characteristics. The masculine energy is straight lines. The feminine energy are curvy lines. If you think of the man's body is sort of straight lines. The woman's body has got curves. This is not about men and women, it's about energies. You can also say that the square is a masculine shape because it has straight lines. The circle is a feminine shape because it doesn't have any straight lines. If you look at in nature, the pure masculine energy is the canine, and the pure feminine energy is the feline. They say that dogs have owners and cats have servants. Also, because you want the masculine energy is loyal. It means it's all about you. Yeah. Because when I give, I'm I'm giving to you. The feminine energy is not about disloyal, but it's about me. It's about self-serving. What's in it for me? Okay, and this is not bad or good. This is simply characteristics of these energies. So a dog, it's all about you. If you offer the dog validation, it'll come to you. That's why you can train a dog, because all it's looking for is validation. It's all about you. The cat, if you call the cat's going to say, "What have you got for me?" And it'll come check out. And if there's nothing there that it has of interest, then like, okay, goodbye. So again, one is straight lines and one is curvy. One is loyal and the other one is self-serving. Okay. And every one of us, we have to have a balance of both of these things. We have to have a balance. So people pleasing is low self-value. Self-value is about receiving. Yeah. It's a feminine energy and it's an unconscious area of development. Self-confidence is a masculine energy, conscious mind, and it's about doing. So again, confidence, masculine energy, doing. Self-value, unconscious area of development, about receiving. So the world is full of people with low self-value and high self-confidence. And this is what brings about people pleasing. So when a person says, yes, I can do that, they're like, yeah, I can do that. I can do that. I can do that. And I'm going to get validation. Yeah, I can do that. And they'll say yes. They won't say no because they're like, I can't say no. And ultimately, when in shadow work, when people raise their self-value, they stop people pleasing because they start to say no to people. Their self-value is basically a measurement or one of the measurements of how often you can say no to people and say yes to yourself. Okay, it's got nothing to do with men or women. These are just energies. The masculine energy is consistent and the feminine energy is erratic or spontaneous. We see this in music because the beat is consistent and the melody is spontaneous and erratic, and you can throw in harmonies. Yeah, you can belt out these like big notes. Again, that's why music is so powerful, because music is a union of masculine energy and feminine energy in a way that just feels good. Again, not men or women. Also, being versus doing. Being is feminine because there's no doing. Doing is masculine because it involves action. The sun is masculine because it's electro and it's a time when we do things. The moon is feminine because it's not electro and it's when we sleep. So the masculine is also active. The feminine is passive. If you look at the act of intercourse, the masculine principle is active and the feminine principle is passive. I'm not saying that you can't mix it up. I'm saying in essence, the laws play out in a very reliable and consistent fashion. The conscious mind is masculine because you can see things as they are. The unconscious mind is feminine because it communicates with clues and context. So when a guy says to someone, "Do whatever you want," when a guy says to his wife, "Do whatever you want," he literally means, "Do whatever you want." When a woman says to a man, "Do what you want," that's not what she means. She really means you better not do what you want and you better ask me what the problem is, because if you don't, then you're sleeping on the couch tonight, brother. So again, it's about something that is content-based, masculine, versus something that is context-based, feminine. Even the cup and the liquid, yeah? The liquid is the content, is like the seed. That's masculine. The context is like the womb, and it's feminine. And these things, they keep on playing out, keep on playing out, keep on playing out. I have one of my diagrams in Breakthrough Matrix Coaching where I speak about and I outline a few, but it's not definitely not exhaustive. quite a few of the characteristics of the masculine principle versus the feminine principle. And our goal as human beings is for men to integrate their inner feminine and for women to integrate their inner masculine. And when doing this, a person becomes harmonious, they become balanced on an energetic level. In order for a person to integrate their inner genders, it has to start on a level of neurology, basically the left brain and the right brain. And by the way, when a person wants to, like if you've got a left brain thinker and a right brain thinker, someone that is primarily masculine energy in their thinking, like left brain or versus right brain, then what bridges the gap between these two different hemispherical thinkers are metaphors. Because a metaphor is a union of both hemispheres. When you're speaking to someone and they don't really understand what you're saying, but then you give a metaphor, the left brain thinker can understand the metaphor because they understand all the technicalities, and the right brain thinker can understand the metaphor because they understand the experience. And that's how you can bridge this gap and communicate a left brain concept to a right brain thinker and the other way around also. And that's basically in a very small nutshell. I can go on about it for much longer, but essentially that's what gender is about. It's about connecting these two energies together so that we can reach a place of wholeness. Because as I spoke about before with the cup and the content, the only time that there is a state of completeness or fullness or wholeness is when the contents and the context, meaning the water in the cup and the size of the cup, are equal.
You said in the beginning when you started talking about this law of gender that, Americans are very sensitive about this. And I want to know, if this is law, if these two polarities are law, then what is the response when people have an aversion to speaking in this way? Because if we're here to balance these two energies and to integrate the part of the energy that we have less access to or that we feel less comfortable with, then not wanting to speak about it is that's basically creating a shadow out of the law. And so, but also, we don't need to create harm for people that are struggling with this. So what is the best way to bridge that gap between something that's law and something that is also really tender for some people?
I don't know how to answer that truthfully without someone either taking it the wrong way, but I'm just going to say it with the most open heart. Ultimately, what we're doing as human beings is that we're making our way from the bottom of the self-value scale to the top of the self-value scale. That's essentially what we're doing. That's our entire life. That's the reason why when you're a kid and when you can start off like with a degrading job or a job that pays you nothing and you do so much, and then when a person is acquiring some sort of education or some sort of level of specialization, then there's a period where they get exploited, whether it's an apprenticeship or whether it's like a new lawyer, like a junior lawyer going into a law firm or a new accountant going to an accountancy firm. They basically sort of pay their dues, and they know that they're going to get paid not a lot for doing a lot of work. And as they get older and they move up the self-value scale, then it becomes more and more unacceptable. So we're all starting off at the bottom of the self-value scale, moving our way up slowly to I want to say the top of the self-value scale because it doesn't really end. But basically what we're doing on an unconscious level, on a level of self-value, on a level of self-awareness, is we're moving up the self-value scale. And the self-value scale, if you wanted to, because self-value is an unconscious area of development, which means it's the negative mind. Negative basically means explaining to someone what it's not. I'll explain what I mean. If I hold up my fingers and I say my favorite finger is my thumb, I told you in a masculine energy what it is. Okay. So what it is, this is my favorite time. It's like a man saying, do what you want. He really means do what you want. But if I were to say that my favorite finger is not this one, not this one, not this one, and not this one, I've said the exact same thing. I just said it in a negative way, which is basically called feminine communication, not women communication, just the communication that is not positive. It's negative communication. It means the same thing. One is saying what it is, another one is saying what it's not. Okay. So because self-value is a negative area of development, that means it's in the unconscious mind, is if you want to improve your self-confidence, you can do it in 2 weeks. You can do it in 1 week. You just practice, get some feedback, do it a few times, and then you start to like, hey, I can do this, I can do this, and then you can actually work on it like immediately. Self-value, it doesn't work like that at all, at all, at all, at all. It takes much longer, and the person you sort of needs a lot of help and guidance around it because it's in the unconscious mind. But if I were to give self-value a definition, like self-confidence, the definition of self-confidence is my level of belief in myself in performing or executing a task. But if I was to look at self-value and say, like, what's the definition of self-value? The best definition of self-value is actually a negative definition. I'll explain what I mean. Self-value is a measure of how much nonsense or BS I'm willing to tolerate in my life. That's it. So at a low level of self-value, I'll tolerate a lot in my life. Like I call it basically, there's a little thing I've got called, I call it diarrhea in the pineapple juice. And it's funny, but it's so accurate because if I would say to you, like, let's say, assuming that your favorite fruit juice is pineapple juice, and I come to you on a hot day with like organically, naturally cold pressed pineapple juice, no ice, chilled just the way you want it, and you're thirsty, and I say, here's your pineapple juice, just the way you like it. There's 3 drops of diarrhea in the pineapple juice. You wouldn't taste it, but you know that it's there. Would you drink the pineapple juice? Now, 99% of people say absolutely not. 1% say, who's diarrhea? And basically they work their way into it. Basically, so for the vast majority of people that say no, then you can ascertain that when it comes to juice, they have 100% self-value because even 1 drop of diarrhea in the pineapple juice renders the whole thing as unacceptable. Unacceptable. Not even half a drop. And what happens is when people raise their self-value, they begin to like suddenly perceive, like they literally suddenly perceive, oh my gosh, this relationship is diarrhea in my pineapple juice, so I cannot drink it anymore. Or this job that I go to that I have to this, or this situation that I've been putting up with because of conscious reason 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, at lower levels of value, it becomes okay. And there's a justified reason about why I have to do this, why I have to stay in this relationship, why I have to stay this degrading job, why I have to be like put up with abuse from this person, that person, whatever. There's a conscious reason, a justification why it's okay until self-value rises. And all of a sudden, this paradigm changes, and all of a sudden it becomes, 1 second, this is diarrhea in my pineapple juice, and I don't have to take it 1 more day. And it's a good analogy because with the diarrhea in the pineapple juice, once you perceive the diarrhea in the pineapple juice, there's no process. There's no process. It's instant. I will not drink this. Thank you. No, thank you. So when I say that in self-value is a measure of how much nonsense you're willing to tolerate, at lower levels of self-value, you'll tolerate a lot. And at higher levels of self-value, you'll tolerate less. Just like at lower levels of self-value, you'll say yes to other people. At high levels, you'll say, let me think about that, or no, I'm not available. And so what happens ultimately is that once we make our way up the self-value level, all of a sudden, men want to be more like the classical form of men. They want to do things more with their hands or with their mind. There's a natural expression that comes out, even if they are not, let's call it so, stereotypical men that are like drink beer or go hiking or like tools. There is something that comes out that is more in alignment with how they're designed because there's less keeping them away. There's less keeping them in internal conflict. And the same thing happens with women, is that as the woman, as both genders, if they start to go up in the self-value, they start to fight less with themselves, fight less with the world, and they just say, no. So a lot of people that are insisting on breaking norms and they're insisting on fighting with people, it's a form of, and this is going to rub some people the wrong way, but I'm just going to say the truth because it's the truth. It's a form of low self-value. And again, low self-value is unconscious. So I didn't know when I was like at, at lower self-value, I didn't know that I had low self-value because I thought I had a really good sense of self until my self-value started going up, and all of a sudden I started perceiving like that's diarrhea in my pineapple juice, that's diarrhea in my pineapple juice, and I started saying no to more things. So the same thing happens that when a person begins to become more aware of who they really are, and they start to give themselves validity because this is an inner child that's looking for validation. Once it was from my parents, and now it's from me. Once that happens, the desire to fight and the desire to like prove a point and the desire to like just basically fight and insist on things, that goes away because there's no longer an internal conflict. And when there's an inner peace, then there's an outer peace as well.
I was thinking while you're talking about just the teaching of, I do a lot of like nervous system trauma work in the realm of shadow work, and the teaching is you create your safety, actually. You create your safety. And when you start to have that sense of inner safety, then there's less of a threat of what other people are experiencing. And I also want to share just like an anecdote to make this maybe a little bit more palatable for anyone that might have a hard time digesting. Like my experience is, I used to have a pretty bad eating disorder. When people would ask me what I ate or where my clothes were from, I would be in like full panic because the wound was like so raw. And the wound that I was processing was so raw. And as that healed over time, it's like people can ask me what I'm eating, and I'm like, oh, do you want a bite? It's fine. Obviously, this is a different realm of life, but it is the same
No, it's a very
picture where
principle.
when the wound is very raw, then many things will irritate it, and it will feel like everything is trying to prevent the wound from healing. But as you can come to this sense of inner peace or this sense of inner safety, then it matters much less what other people are saying or doing, and you can hold these universal laws as truth without it being an attack on like who you are. So yeah, thank you.
Amazing.
We always end the podcast with two questions. The first is part of our mission with this podcast is to provide numerous, abundantly clear examples of good men, to keep it simple. And you've mentioned a few names throughout. You mentioned a book earlier, but who are some men that you've looked to over the course of your life, whether you know them personally or through books or education, that our audience could look to as well?
One of the first people that I looked up to, that I learned a lot from, because when reading his books, I felt like he was describing the way I think, and that's Tony Robbins. I think Tony Robbins was the first person to actually coin the term coach out of sports. And what Tony Robbins has done for the self-development world, I think very few people can even come close to what he's done. You know what? To be very honest with you, I never really looked outside too much for these role models. When I discovered John DeMartini, I loved the way he spoke also because he also communicates universal laws probably better than I can. And one of the things that he said, that when you put someone on a pedestal, you subject yourself to their values. And one thing I've learned in my own life, it's never a light step off a pedestal. When you get off a pedestal, you get ripped off the pedestal, and then the person that put you on the pedestal that ripped you off, then jumps on your head and says, how could you not be what I thought that you were? And they feel very betrayed by the person that pedestals humanity. And so John Martini really, I still think he's amazing, and I still recommend him to many people. But the truth be told is that I was blessed to have a very, very, very principled father, and he didn't really lay things out for me the same way that organizations like the Mankind Project that played a very big part in my life, like they laid things out in a framework that like you can't look left or right. You just got to like look at this thing as it is. But what I discovered even on that retreat of the Mankind Project was like guys had like these serious, serious father wounds, is that I didn't have any of those father wounds. I got mother issues. Uh, You know, no one's without their issues. But in terms of a father, like my dad was just a very principled man and always just like did the right thing, at least tried to do the right thing. And in a it was more modeled. It was modeled for me in a very sort of in a very precise way that it was just I just saw my dad as to be as like a person doing the right thing. Today, today, Jordan Peterson in extremely high regard, extremely high esteem. I don't agree with everything that he says because he's quite an extremist, but I believe I believe he's really holding the mantle of the mature masculine today, believing in himself without wanting to cause anybody any harm. Mm. Being South African, obviously, I'm highly influenced by Nelson Mandela, and his thing that he said that touched me the most is that he spent 27 years in jail, and it was not just. So he had like he was wronged. He was wronged, and he said when he came out of jail, he said, if any of my people do to the white man what they did to me, I will turn around and I will walk back into the cell of my own accord. And I just think that for someone to have that type of vision and for someone to have that type of integrity and that type of power to the point that he ensured a pretty safe and peaceful transition of power in a country that was like the home of apartheid, the home of racism, that apart means separate and hide means law. In Afrikaans, it's the law of separateness. It means that it was legal to do all of these things. So Nelson Mandela has played a very big part just in my childhood and just where I've come from. In my later years, specifically as like a Hasidically inclined Jew, the person that plays the biggest role in my life, he's no longer alive, but his legacy leaps on, is a rabbi called the Lubavitcher Rebbe. He was the leader of a sect of Hasidism called Chabad, or from Lubavitch. This guy was a pure, like a pure soul that could see, he could give blessings, that could do miracles, and his teachings have lived on long after he passed. And so these are the people that have basically like played a big role in my life.
And then our last question, we always want people to leave these episodes with like something actionable that they can do. And so if there was a little piece of integration or homework that you were to give to the listeners, what would that be?
Okay. Number one, whatever you're going through, know that it's a type of boot camp that in order for there to be an expansion, there has to be a contraction. There absolutely has to be a contraction. So whatever, if you're going through hell, keep going. You're not doing anything wrong. That's so important to understand, is that you're not doing anything wrong. Anything that you can learn about changing your vibration or changing your paradigm, it doesn't mean that you're making a mistake now. Every single second of your life is divinely, perfectly designed for you. It may take a while for this to become apparent, but it will become apparent. I want you to know also that no one ever gets away with anything. So if you've been wronged and you feel this deep sense of injustice that needs to be rectified, don't make it your problem, because then you're holding resentment. No one gets away with anything in this life. No one gets away with anything. Karma will do a much better job of rectifying injustices than you ever could. Ever could. And the most important thing is just understand is that within your sense of oneness, in your sense of singularity, if I can verb myself, if I can love myself, hate myself, accept myself, be disappointed with myself, be proud of myself, if I can verb myself, then that must mean that within me, there's someone doing the verb and someone getting verbed. It's got to be a subject and an object within me. And the sense of duality, it is so holy because that's where it's at, people. The relationship that you have with yourself is the ultimate relationship, and all other relationships emanate from this primary relationship between I and myself. And you got to understand something, that the person that you're speaking to in the inside, it's not the adult in the mirror, it's an innocent child. It's an innocent child that cannot fight back. And so one thing that you can control is right now. Right now. You may not be able to change your vibration immediately. You may not be able to change your beliefs immediately. But one thing that you can change right now is your self-talk. And you can just be nice to yourself. You can do that right now. And so just remember that no pain lasts forever. All contractions end in expansion. The most important relationship that you have with is yourself. And you're basically a babysitter guarding and protecting an innocent 5, 6, or 7-year-old. And if you can make that relationship the most important one and realize that it's actually your own best, you take your inner peace and you bring that to the top of your priority list, and that becomes the standard by which you make decisions. So if you got a decision that's going like, I need the money, I'm going to take this job because the money is good, but everything else sucks. I promise you, within 1 month, the money won't mean anything, and all that you're left with is, are you at peace? Are you happy waking up, or are you not? So the last bit of it is basically make peace your number one priority and base all of your decisions based on your inner peace.
Mhm.
Mm.
Love it. And we'll put all of this in the show notes. But for the listeners that want more of you, that want more of your teachings, to learn more about these laws, where can they find you?
Thank you. Well, I've got my learning site that's got a lot of free stuff, is breakthroughmatrix.com. If anybody wants to read about me, then it's a little bit difficult, but my name is Doron-Yitzchak.com. That's my email address, my website. That's my website. And then I've got a YouTube channel with a lot of stuff, and I've got an Instagram channel also, and that would be at Breakthrough Matrix Coaching. And if you just Google my name, everything else will come up. If you got to choose any one of those things, go to breakthroughmatrix.com, sign up for the Genesis program. There's a lot of free stuff that will blow your mind. And I want there to be no barrier of entry to information, facilitation and guidance, maybe. But information, I want to make it as free as possible. So go knock yourselves out and hold on to your mind.
Yeah, and his free stuff is awesome. I've consumed some of it and plan to dive more into it. Thank you so much. For the listeners, if you haven't yet, please follow the show, leave a rating and a review. It helps us so much, and it helps these messages reach more of the people who need it.